Welcome to Beat Diabetes. I'm Dennis Pollock, and excuse me for a moment while I sip my coffee and sip my tea. You're saying, Dennis, I've never seen you do that before at the opening of one of your videos. Why are you doing that now? Well, it's because of the subject matter, which has to do with coffee and tea and cream and sweeteners of different kinds, non-sugar sweeteners, that is. So we're going to start out with just a little info about coffee versus tea and the health benefits and the popularity of each. I got this from Art of Tea website, artoftea.com, and it talks about several countries and how they prefer coffee or tea. The United States, as you might suppose, is about 3/4 in favor of coffee, and about 1/4 of the population drink tea. United Kingdom, almost the exact opposite. 78% prefer tea, 21% coffee. Russia, 77% tea, 22% coffee. China, you can guess where China would be. It's like 99% of the Chinese like tea and prefer tea, and 1% drink coffee. That would be interesting to meet that 1% and how they got to be such coffee drinkers. Mexico prefers coffee over tea by almost 90 to 10%. Australia is about half and half. Sweden, 90% coffee, only 9% tea. Argentina, not quite half and half. The majority prefer coffee, but 43% prefer tea. Germany, it's about 60% coffee to 40% tea. Nigeria, which I have a special interest in since my wife is from there, 95% tea, only about 5% coffee. And you can guess why that is, because they were a colony of the British Empire at one time, and the British left their love for tea with the Nigerians, even when they pulled out. Brazil, 97% coffee and only about 2.6% tea. But worldwide, tea is much more popular than coffee. If you put everybody together and counted the whole world, tea would win by over coffee in a big measure. So what about coffee and tea? First of all, caffeine. A cup of coffee has about twice as much caffeine as a cup of tea. So if you're in the evening, you say, I've got to drink one or the other, and probably better to drink tea. It's not going to keep you up so much. And then a cup of green tea is about half what a cup of black tea is, so far less caffeine than a cup of black tea. But the most caffeine is going to come from straight coffee, unless it's decaf, of course. Now, there was a time when people just assumed they had no real health benefits one way or the other. They're just a nice thing to drink. You enjoy them, or you do it because your parents did it. But don't expect them to do much for you health-wise. They're not going to be filled with vitamins and minerals or any such thing. But as they've done research over the last generation, they found they actually do have health benefits. They have antioxidants. According to this article, coffee and tea can both help you lose weight, surprisingly. The caffeine in the coffee and the tea can help you burn more fat. And a normal consumption of it can increase your metabolism, your body temperature. Dutch researchers found that a high caffeine group lost more weight and body fat than a low caffeine group. So if you need to lose weight, maybe you ought to start drinking a little coffee or tea. And then coffee and tea are both associated with longer lifespans. They did a 18 to 24-year study on 120,000 men and women, and coffee was associated with a lower risk of mortality. And then they did another analysis of 1 million people, 1 million men and women, and found a similar association between coffee and all-cause mortality, meaning if you're a regular coffee drinker, chances are you're going to live longer than your neighbor who doesn't drink coffee at all, according to that study. In the British Journal of Nutrition, researchers analyzed 18 studies and found that tea could also reduce the risk of all-cause mortality. And here's the shocker. According to this, coffee can even reduce the risk of type 2 diabetes. A long-term study of over 120,000 people by the Harvard School of Public Health found that drinking coffee was associated with a significantly lower risk of type 2 diabetes. And even decaf coffee could help with that. So it must be something in the coffee itself along with the caffeine. Coffee can protect your liver, according to this. Tea and coffee can reduce the risk of cardiovascular disease. A 13-year study from the Netherlands felt that tea and coffee were linked to a lower risk of cardiovascular mortality, with a stronger link with tea than with coffee. So, I mean, it looks like, and of course, I guess part of it would depend on just how much you drink it. If you drink too much of anything, I suppose, coffee or tea, it could be bad for you. But if you drink coffee or tea in a normal fashion, a reasonable fashion, a moderate fashion, there's pretty good chances it could actually do some good for you. In summary, the article says both drinks have a wide range of health benefits. So, I can believe that. This is not the only time I've heard this. And it's kind of a shocker because when I was younger, I just assumed there were no health benefits at all. It's just something you do. And I didn't know if there were any negative effects, but I figured there weren't any positive ones. And lo and behold, it turns out there are some. So, just a couple of quick questions. This isn't going to be too long today, but why are coffee and tea so popular? Why do people, they're hugely popular all over the world. In any and every country, people are either going to tend to lean toward coffee or toward tea, but they're going to drink one or the other. And in some cases, like moi, they'll drink both. And I do. I drink tea and I drink coffee. There have been times where I focused more on tea and others, like these days, where I focus more on coffee, but I do drink both. Well, one of the reasons people drink coffee and tea is just culture. You grew up in a society where people drank coffee and tea. And I'll never forget when I decided I needed to start drinking coffee. I was like maybe 20 years old, 21, 22, in my early 20s. And all adults drank coffee as far as I could see. And I thought, well, it's time for me to grow up and learn how to drink coffee. And the first few times of drinking it didn't taste good at all. Putting some cream in it helped, but it didn't really do it. And then I found a way to do it. And that was, I had a college course where we had a break in between classes at night. And so with a little time to kill, I would go to a coffee machine, I would get coffee, and then I went to a pastry machine and would get a donut. So I had coffee and a donut, and I found that by drinking a sip of coffee and then having a piece of donut and then drinking a little coffee and having a little donut, they just blended beautifully. And I found I could enjoy the coffee, and even the donuts seemed to taste better with the coffee. They just complemented each other. And I think that's one reason that another reason why coffee and tea are so popular, because people like sweet things. But if you eat something super sweet, like a donut or some kind of a sugar-laden pastry, it almost tastes yucky sweet, too sweet. And so you eat some of the pastry and you have a sip of coffee, and the bitterness of the coffee goes with the sweetness of the pastry, and you enjoy it. And of course, traditionally in America, people would have as a dessert cake or pie, and they'd drink some coffee with it, and they just seem to make each other better. So that's another reason. Another reason that coffee and tea are popular is they give you a caffeine buzz. And you just kind of feel energized, and you feel that little bit of a buzz. I mean, it's not like a powerful drug, but you can definitely feel it. And I admit I enjoy that little buzz as well. So for those of you that are diabetics, and that's primarily most of the people who watch this channel, your question is, well, yeah, but what do they do to blood sugar? The answer is almost nothing if you don't mess with them and add a bunch of sugar to them. So coffee has virtually no carbs to it. I mean, yeah, it has maybe half of a gram of carb for a cup of coffee, but I mean, essentially nothing. So there's really no way it should raise your blood sugar. Now, I've had people leave comments saying, yeah, but coffee raises my blood sugar. I honestly beg to differ. I don't really believe that. But I'll tell you why some people think coffee raises their blood sugar. They may decide this morning I'm going to have coffee. I won't eat anything else. I'll just have some coffee. And I'll test my blood sugar before the coffee and an hour after the coffee, and we'll see if my blood sugar goes up. Well, that's kind of my standard way of determining which foods work for me. So I can't blame you for doing that. But here's the problem with that kind of an approach with coffee. When you're in the morning time, the dawn effect is going to tend to cause your glucose to rise up till maybe 11 o'clock in the morning, and then it will start to go down. So if you say, I won't eat any food, I'm not going to have a breakfast, I just want to test and see what the coffee does, and let's say you drink your coffee at 9 a.m., and you test beforehand, and your blood sugar is, let's say, 105, and then now it's 10 a.m., you've drank your coffee, and you test again, or 10:15 maybe, give you 15 minutes to drink it, you test again, and whereas it was 105, now it's 122, you say, aha, that coffee raised my blood sugar. Probably it didn't. Probably what raised your blood sugar was the dawn effect. Your body noticed that there's no carbs involved. It ignored the coffee, but it was in the midst of going up from the dawn effect, which it typically will do till about 11 a.m. in many cases. In my case, it does. So if you test it early morning and then you noticed an hour later that your blood sugar is higher, it doesn't mean the coffee did it. You probably got swept up in the current of the dawn effect. And if you don't know what that is, you can Google it or put that in YouTube. Now, on the other hand, if you test, you drink your coffee at 11 and you then test at noon, while your blood sugar tends to be going back down, the dawn effect has done its dastardly deed and raised your blood sugar, and now you're testing at noon and the blood sugar is lower, you may say, wow, this coffee actually lowered my blood sugar. Chances are it did not. Chances are you were just going with the current of your dawn effect going up and then starting to come back down. So depending on when you test, you may notice quite a difference between when you drank the coffee and when you tested, but that's really not much evidence that the coffee did it. Now, if you want to be more precise and scientific about it, have a very low-carb lunch and then wait about 3 hours later. Let's say you eat at 12:30, and it's low-carb anyway, so your blood sugar is not going to do much. Wait about 3 hours, and at that point, there's no dawn effect involved. And then you test your blood sugar and you drink the coffee, test it an hour later, and see what happens. And if it goes way up or way down at that point, let's say you drink the coffee at 3:30 and test at 4:30, then maybe you can make a case. I don't think it's going to have much effect. If you've recently been diagnosed with diabetes and you've just discovered this channel, let me recommend that you go to our Uploads page, which will give you access to every diabetic video we've posted since we began. As you work your way through all our videos, I believe you'll find the help you need. A link to our Uploads page is in the description.